Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, aka Miss Irene for my young peeps. I am the Bible study teacher. Welcome to Generationally Speaking 21st Century Bible Study. Join me each week at the table with my co hosts from Gen X's, Gen Y's, and even Gen Z's as we discuss life victories, struggles, and the issues we all face no matter our age, with the Bible, the scripture as the final word. My co host today include Minister James Durham, uh, Eric Smith, entrepreneur, tech partner, Craig Hines, teacher and author. And then our special guest today is Jeff Wilson, entrepreneur and certified public accountant. Have you ever been accused of listening and not hearing?
Yep.
I am sure many of us have heard someone say to us, "Are you listening? Did you hear what I said?" Sometimes the answer has been, "No, I haven't heard a word you said." We sometimes listen to people we want to hear and turn off those we don't want to hear. Sometimes we will hear the hard truth, and other times we choose to believe a lie. It is important we become great listeners, that we weigh the words of encouragement given to us, that we hear the truth, and as the old folks used to say, and you all may have never heard this expression before, but chew up the meat and spit out the bone.
Yes. That's my first.
I am reminded of a narrative in the scripture where Solomon dies, and his son Rehoboam is the next king in line. This narrative is found in 1 Kings 12 and 8, and scripture tells us that Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders given him, and he instead consulted with young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. This scripture teaches us two things. That first, we ought to pray for God for guidance and making sure we find the right person to ask for guidance. And secondly, we need to choose the voice of wisdom wisely. Now, some folk walk away from this passage of scripture believing that young people can't give you any wisdom, can't give you any advice, can't speak any truth to you. But that's not what this scripture is teaching. This scripture is teaching that you need to be careful about who you listen to. Because sometimes a person that has a vested interest in you, they may not tell you the truth, but they might tell you what they think you want to hear, simply because they're riding on your coattail. But you got to have some folk in your sphere of influence who gonna speak truth to you even when you don't want to hear it. And so today, I know that I have one of those persons, a young man, Jeff Wilson. I met Jeff years ago, and I watched him grow and become so successful. I'm so extremely proud of you, Jeff. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the table as we talk more about pursuing our dreams. And so, with that in mind, how in the world did an African American male become so entrenched in finances? Most people, they don't want to do math. So here you are. Tell me about it.
I was bad at math when I came in. Don't let my high school math teacher see this. He'd be like, we need to check the books. I think what happened, truthfully, I was not like, I don't think, I had as you asked this question, I actually looked over a period of time, like high school, middle school, and just my childhood, and kind of, I say, how did I kind of get here? Because you always kind of want to know, how did the journey kind of start, right? And I think for me, it was kind of like, when I was young, I wanted to sell stuff, right? And like I was selling like Kool-Aid mix, coming up. And I remember my mom telling me, she's like, when you were a kid, you had a sign out in front of the window that said toys for sale, $5, right? So I think, I think some of that was kind of bred into me a little bit, and I kind of learned it. But I think what finance that got me more hardcore into just wanting to understand how things work. I am that type of person. And so when I got introduced, my mentor in college, she introduced me to the stock market and Wall Street and things like that. And that was good enough. Like, I understood how ticker symbols and things were, but I needed to understand how the whole thing worked. And because I was so inquisitive about, not necessarily, I needed to understand how economics and money work. I'm intrigued by that. Not just like the actual dollar, but money as a global and a micro and macro environment. So that it's always something new some other nuance that I wasn't privy to. So I was just wanted to go deeper and deeper. And, sometimes that leads me to geopolitics to understand why money is a certain way. Why is the Chinese economy and why is the African continent the way it is? Because it's all wrapped up into one. So it kind of leads me to these different areas. But that just intrigued me. And it's always a never-ending story to it and gives me a better understanding just when I hear things and when I'm trying to explain to a layman's person and people of our own community and kind of say, and I think it's also to stop people from spreading fallacies, and I think we have a lot of money fallacies in our community, and say, no, that's not how this really works. Sometimes that works, sometimes they don't. Sometimes.
So I know you've written a book. So tell us a little bit of the title of your book, because the title alone will make you want to go buy it.
Yeah. Make you go buy it or have my mom say, don't listen to this boy. So the title of my book, The Lies Our Parents Were Sold and Told Us. And I got this inspiration from a friend, a small business owner, and me and him were having a conversation. We always have late night conversations about money. And he was like, man, you got to write a book. He's like, you got to write a book about this stuff. And, because he was much more successful. I think this company was about $100 million in revenue. And, but he was like, no, people don't understand what you're saying. He was like, you got to do this. You know this stuff. And he kind of inspired me to take the book. And then as I was telling him, we were having a conversation, and how I came up with the title of Our Lies. I said, the lies our parents were sold and told us. And I said, the thing about it, we talked in one segment about like the good government job and what it all meant, right? And what it meant security, but it didn't mean these other things about, it meant security, but it also meant a ceiling, right? Yeah. It was these things, like it gave you security, but it didn't give you no room for growth, right? It didn't give you the ability to really set the foundation, right? It gives you a small foundation for your family and the minority community, but if you looked at other communities, that wasn't what they were doing, and so their kids were somewhat starting off with a greater head start than people in the African American community. So what I was working on doing is, and hoping I can get this into many hands as I could, not only for the parents but people in my generation and going forward, is, hey, that lesson you talking about money makes no sense, and I try to do it in the nicest way possible. The book is much nicely written than the title, but I had to go through it, and I went through this moment, right? And my parents, my dad's from Mississippi, he's a country boy, and my mother's from Polk County, Florida, all very poor places in the U.S. And I thought about the rules they had about money, and my dad got to see a portion of it, when we were when I was in college, when the button started clicking for me, and I think he thought I was more ignorant and stuff because he was still doing stuff, and I'm like, don't do that. Like, I like, dude, that's not the right, that is a bad idea. And he was like, man, this college done mess with your brain, boy. And I would be like, no, man, that is a bad money move. And it was funny. It was just, I was like, dude, I'm putting my money in stock, man. I ain't doing this, what you talking about. No, man, no more carpet cleaning. This business is dead. And so I had these things about I had come to grips with some things about money that I had learned, being a CPA. I was in different circles. Yeah. I understood wealth more. So my experiences had changed, and now I understood it. I would go to an event and I would have like a white partner or something. He'd be talking about his boat or his yacht or something like that. I'm like, what? Yeah, take a picture of it, Jeff. And I'm like, dude, we don't see this in Mississippi. This ain't right. And so I learned these things, so I wanted to share it, and then kind of put a stop to some things that people were doing that I think that has kind of left our community kind of behind.
Yes.
And really help set people up on a different path. Because I think that one of the things, that we've done, we've set ourselves back in playing one. Not seeking knowledge financially, but also, not thinking the way that we need to about the next generation. Yes. I think, a lot of times, my mother told me the same thing. She was like, oh, you think about it, today's family, like a lot of people aren't leaving their houses at 18, right? You got to, we call them boomerang kids, right? Right. But, and remember, in our community, minority communities, remember before it was us, mama, everybody was all in the house. Yeah, and it was going to be there. We all bought the wallet back to the house, and then we divvied it up to make it go. But, now our community is more like, oh, you got to be out here by 18 or something like that. And I'm not saying that's wrong, But I'm saying if you look at other communities and how they're taking a jump step ahead of us, if you really look at it, it's because they're following the old way of bringing it all in and then putting the money together to put all their kids through college. Then they'll separate, but not until then. So I think there's just fallacies like that. One of the biggest things I'm really a big proponent of, I'm just choking anybody who has a 30-year mortgage, because if you look at it now, like, you know, if you're 30, let's say you get your house at 30, you have a 30-year mortgage, that means you're going to be in debt till you're 60, maybe 62, 65. Well, that's the Social Security age. There's no fun in that. It's like, I mean, there's really no fun in being in retirement and having a mortgage. That doesn't make any sense. And so, you know, things like that where we need to be focusing on really owning your own and owning your own early on. You know, if you bought your house at 30 and you had a 15-year mortgage, great. You're done with your largest asset, that thing that's really yours, at 45. That changes that dynamic of, not about, and it's not even about, it is a little bit about wealth, no question, but it's also about life, right? The things that people are forced to do at 60 and 50 because of these bad financial decisions. And it'll be great, you know, if you were 45 and you said, hey, you know what, I've been stressing myself out, I had a bad quality of life working at this job, but you know what, my life expectancy is 75 and I'm 45, I got another 30, I ain't doing this no more, I'm gonna be a Walmart greeter and I'm gonna enjoy my life. It changes the dynamic, and that's all I want to do is just change the dynamic of what's health and wealth and how that really looks, that sanity that you get, like that you can make those type of decisions. And so and I talk about in the book, another thing about it is just, you know, my parents, I'm a pro stock person. Anybody knows me that knows that, right? And then my parents were, I remember this guy, his name is, I can't say his name on camera, Isaiah. He was a life insurance guy, man. That shyster, you know, and I said to say that, and I joke, I kid and joke, you know, because I know we still have a policy with him. But you know, my mother did life insurance, right? And you know, they sold it as like this investment tool, and sometimes it can be, right? I mean, we have these arguments a lot, right? Yes. And we have competitive conversations. Yes. That's we talk about life insurance, about what the purpose is, right? And I think that sometimes some of these products in our community are sold like this is a wealth creator, and maybe it can be, but I think you break it down to its most simplistic form. Life insurance is to bury your family members and to make sure that, you know, in the case that if you have a young child, that person doesn't feel the burden of one parent being gone. That is really the purpose, not these intrinsic things. So I wanted to kill some of those fallacies around, hey, what these things are really doing. And unfortunately, I can't get rid of all the snake oil salesmen, but what I can really help people say is, hey, this is what it's meant to be, right? You know, we can no longer be ignorant to the stock market in our community. We have to seek that information, seek out and kind of learn it. And unfortunately, we don't have, this is one of my biggest hurdles with my own knowledge is how do we get this information out to the masses, because we're priced out of it as a community, right? And that's an issue I'm fighting constantly with myself, even my spirituality with God, and saying, God, I don't know how we do this one, but it's trying to figure out how to get that type of information and service to underserved communities that typically, you know, just can't really afford it, you know, that type of expert.
I just wanted to say something right responding to that immediately. That I was literally just thinking it. I think it's incredible for someone like yourself that looks like us to be giving it community information like this, because like you said, they priced out. And I've had a conversation with a friend before, and we were talking about, like, when it comes to like black people, I've seen like sometimes we can even be scared talking about money, because it's like having a conversation from a place of scarcity. Like it isn't. We have a different relationship with money. So you really educating us on the world of it, and I think our experience of it has just affected our psychology of it so much, you know. And
it's hard to fight it. You know, it's kind of interesting. And as a CPA, I've learned over a period of time, like when I talk to my colleagues and stuff, and we talk about clients, and I told a CPA one time, actually just recently, I was like, yeah, so you know, we supposed to serve the mass public. Like, no. And he was like, no, we don't serve the mass public. And this is not a knock. He just said it the right way. He said, we serve people with complicated financial matters, right? And people will and I took that a step further, and then I took this in our community, because I come from an urban community, so he probably knows that, but he doesn't understand it. That's not his job. So I took it a step further and said, "Yep, we do serve people with complex financial situations. That is our job. But from a community standpoint, my people have complex ones, but the funds to actually service it because." That's the problem.
That's the problem.
They can't.
Wow.
That's the problem.
Yeah, like if it costs, you have to invest, and it's nothing against us as CPAs or something, anybody in their profession. But what happens is we raise the price of being able to service a certain group. Like the investment it takes individually, right, to become a CPA, right? Like to become a financial planner, certified financial planner, it's a lot of money, right? And so you have to recoup it, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you recoup that? By charging for your services. There's only one problem with that. There's a group that likely will be left out. So it's not that the person doesn't want to work. You know, a financial planner wouldn't want to work with somebody in middle class America or even the lower middle class. It's the problem that they can't do it. If they did, they in turn recoup a loss, right? Because they have to recoup the investment. I mean, I'm going to a training. I'm going to a school in 3 weeks. It's costing me $2,000. It's costing me $3,000. So what does that mean? I have to recoup that from a client by servicing that point. So I think that's one of the issues we have as a community, and we have to kind of figure out. I'm not saying I'm gonna be the person that kind of comes up with it, but I'm thinking about how do you do it. And I've tried different ways, and it's a trial and error in a way. I've tried different methods of trying to do it, and trying to make it that it's actually cost effective. But yeah.
So staying on the subject of our community, right? Mm-hmm. Because I mean, one thing you may have experienced is the conversations are a little different when you talk to our community.
Yeah.
Right.
You
mentioned. I mean, you mentioned earlier, right? Yeah. Generational wealth.
Yeah.
Right, and looking in past generations, and not only how my kids are going to be affected, but how are my kids, and what am I doing to make sure my kids are in a situation, right? Because if you really look at other communities and these people that have, the corner stores and these people that have all these things, right? And you see these kids come up in these stores, and you look at them, and growing, and I grew up. You look at those kids, and I went to school with them, and you say, "Oh man, you working in the corner store," but you don't realize the experience that they get, that things that you can't get in school, right? And you talk to some folks, and they're like, "Hey, all right, I understand. I only got $200, but." Man, it's these shoes I really want. I get my kids only 5. They'll be in college. I got 12 years, 13 years before I get to that point where they're in college. Or it's this purse that I really want, right? And I've worked extremely hard for that purse.
She want that purse.
Right? So what advice do you give those individuals?
I work in corporate America, and so I'm articulate, and then sometimes I can be rough. And so I don't have a rough answer for this. You got to stop thinking about yourself, right? It's just, I think we all have, and I think just some of the things that we do, it's not about us, or it can be about us, but even if it's about your child, that is used too. So I think it's playing the long game and trying to get people start to be shortened in their thinking, and understand it's about the Smiths, it's about the Wilson, it's about pushing your family forward, and that's the real win, right? It's not the person, things like that, and I'm sorry, women, I don't want to make it men buy shoes, I got a watch problem, whatever those things are. But we have to say, hey, we're pushing our family forward in order to, because let's just be real. The reason that our African Americans are behind is because money does not move up a generation in our community. It stays right there. Once it's over, it's over. Right back to the bottom. There you go. The reason if you're in the news now, they're like, oh, we're ready for the most historic wealth transfer ever. You know why? Because some other community is transferring funds from their mother, from mother to son or father to son, and they're pushing that forward. So we all win when that happens in our community, and that's how we embetter our communities. So I would say, and here's the other thing: it doesn't take $1 million or something. It just takes a small thing. Like for me, I got two ways of really saving up for my son, just right now, right? And one is I get $150, right? It goes directly out of my account, and it goes to his UTMA's trading account, right? So I buy some stocks with $150. I wait till the rule is I wait till I have, I'm gonna say it's kind of a rule. Whenever I have $500, I go buy something. I go buy a stock, right? Something that's just a blue chip, something I know that's not gonna go out of business. Walmart, Amazon, whatever. All right, or something that's fun that kind of supports that. And then I have all my change, right? So all my change, like when I go in the house, I put in this piggy bank. Normally when I do that, I'll get about $200 in this little jar, and guess where that's going? It's going straight to the account, and that's over a period of time. That number keeps growing. And I buy stocks that pay some type of dividend, some give back. So he has, there you go. And I think over a period of time, and those are just small things that we could all do to help. If we all did that, our community would be 20 times better, right? It's just that small thing. It's like, hey, it's just $150. Just move it over. Do this here, and over a period of time it grows instead of kind of waiting and they go that route.
There are young family members who might be looking on and they hear you say, $150, and they're thinking, gosh, what I would do to have $150 extra. So the person who feels like I don't have that money, I'm struggling just trying to pay the rent, I'm struggling just trying to get back and forth to work. What do you say to them?
I say, if you don't have 150, we'll take 50. We'll put 50 in, and I think the other thing is, and I totally understand that struggle, and I've worked with clients like that, and what you have to do is, sometimes budget shortages, let's call it a budget, is based on expenses, and sometimes it's based on income, right? Now, if there's an expense problem where we're saying, listen, you got enough income coming in, but we need to cut some of these things out. That means, hey, you may have to eat in a little bit more. Pizza can't be called out, but this is for the greater good, and it'll definitely save you a lot of trouble in the future and save your kids. Some kids are going to school with no college loan, no debt, and that's because their parents pre-planned these type of things. So it's not setting them back. To be out of college right now with no college debt, you have won. You're halfway beating everybody. That's a head step. So think about that when you're saying, hey, I need that bag or I need these shoes. I'm a CPA, whatever. Some people think I'm rich. I shop at Kmart before they close it down in Clinton. So I don't, and I'm dead serious about that. You can ask anybody. So you have to make some sacrifices to kind of cut it. And then and for the person that it's about income, there are other ways. Now we have to fix that. We have to do other things. I had a friend who was kind of in that same situation, and I just had to be really honest with him. I was like, brother, you gonna have to get you a second job. Just straight up. He's like, oh, I don't want no second job. I said, brother, you ain't got a choice. You're gonna have to make some sacrifices to put yourself to get to the next level. If not, you're gonna still live. He was living in the projects. I said, you're gonna still live in these projects until you get a second job. You need to stop playing. You got 3 miles to feed, brother. You're gonna have to do this, and once you do this, trust me, your life will be better. But you really got to step out on faith and really do that, and really, like I said, take yourself out of the position and kind of think of it like, kind of more of a family first kind of thing, right? And then,
there are a few things that our community kind of struggle with, like we kind of shy away from going and getting therapy, and as you're speaking of investing, a lot of people in our community, they have a bad emotional relationship with investing. Talk about how they can better manage that, or how they can wrap because a lot of people watching, it's hard for them to even wrap their mind about going and buy a stock.
Well, I think, and you're right, and I think I wouldn't say it's a bad relationship. It's a foreign relationship, right? It's not, you're not introduced to it. So I think it's really, this is really tough because I know a lot of people won't do it, but really taking some time to really educate themselves, right, about finances, right? And there are so many books. This is one of them that you can really learn about basic finance. And there's one book I always start out with. I think it's called This Little Book of Financing, about finance, and it's written by like a 6 or 10-year-old at the particular time. And I'll get you the book. And it's when I first started doing financial coaching. It was the first book I gave to my clients. It was like, this is the easiest book I've ever read that I ever know of, to really just give you the basics and just really start educating yourself. Because the problem is, you could say, well, go get a financial advisor, but hey, if that person is giving you advice and you don't really understand what it is, then you can that's what creates the bad relationships with money, because you have people doing things that you don't really understand what they're doing. So you gotta educate yourself. This isn't the time to really sit on the sideline. It's like, well, I'll just cut somebody a check. No, you really gotta educate yourself. Ask that person questions, right? And they shouldn't feel offended. They should just be like, all right, here goes the answer. But you have to invest the time and understanding and learning. There's no shortcuts to this, right? There's a reason, right? You have to really educate just on the basics. And I think that would do just a lot. This is a couple of small books. You can give Minister Smith, and I would send her the titles. But those things will really just help on that end.
So say they take the step and they invest in stocks, and they look at the market, up and down, and whoa, it's going down. I'm gonna go sell. How should they handle
the peaks and valleys of the market? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that, so there's going to be peaks and valleys of the market, right? And I think this about taking the market is you can get very entrenched with it, right? So you have to be, I would say, don't be emotional, right? Stick to your long-term strategy, and that may need getting a financial advisor to kind of help you say with the long-term strategy, but stick with your strategy. Understand it's not about today. It's about tomorrow. Tomorrow 5 years from now, not today, right? And if you look at the historical averages of the stock market, you'll really see that it's a win. You will come out on top. And I will also say, when people kind of argue me, say, well, what about why we do a stock market? I say, well, what's your alternative? Because there is no greater wealth generator in the U.S. besides maybe a small business. Yeah.